Okay, hello and welcome to our Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar. And yes, this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it normally goes for 3 hours, but sometimes longer, sometimes less. Probably going to go for less tonight because I'm really tired, if you can't tell by looking at me. But how is everybody doing? How is your week? Huffle Mom says, hi, oh my God, am I first? Second, actually. Kenneth beat you here. Mothering Hand says, hello. Kamami says, bonsoir. Kenneth says, nice to see you again. Yes, welcome, welcome. What is new and exciting in everybody's world? How are you guys doing with everything? All of the kind of COVID stuff, especially if you're here in the United States, or I guess if you're not here in the United States, are you enjoying your summer in other parts of the country? Amber says, I'm new here. Happy to have found your channel. Well, welcome, Amber. We're happy to have you. Oh, Kenneth says, Dana, the Egyptian licorice tea was good. Yes, I'm glad you enjoyed it. People tend to either love it or hate it. I personally think it's just the perfect blend. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's see, E-Rock is here. Oh, Lisa says, I'm new here as well. Well, welcome, Lisa. So since we have a couple new people on, and I know we're only a minute into the live stream, these live streams, it can get a little chaotic. It takes a few times, I think, of being in one to kind of get the hang of it. So the chat can move pretty quickly, and you guys just feel free to ask any questions, and I will do my best to answer them. And yeah, that's kind of how this works. Let's see. James says he has a major college brain. Oh boy. Well, hopefully your semester's almost over, right? Iraq says, it's been a tough, hot, gritty summer here in New York. Scary times. City-born dweller, but I've always wanted to live in the country. Iraq says, wow, people from so many places. And thank you, James, for saying that too. I always forget. He says, if you put an @thrive after abuse, it'll highlight in orange. And so then I'm more likely to see it. Now James is saying he's got one more final tomorrow. That's good. That'll be a relief. Sharon is here from Scotland. Hello. Iraq says, I'm dealing with some heavy stuff. Not sure if it's a good place to share it here. I always get carried away. Well, I say go for it. Whatever you're comfortable sharing. Mystique asks, is DBT a therapy choice for narcissistic abuse syndrome? Narcissistic abuse syndrome isn't an official diagnosis in the DSM. So that means a handful of different things. So it means that there hasn't, at least to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any studies done as far as what treatments are used for it, or any of that. So DBT, so kind of with that said, DBT is a very frequently recommended therapy for those struggling with emotional dysregulation, in particular borderline personality disorder. So DBT, there's a lot of, it's like anything, right? There's pros and cons to it. The pros are that it's a structured program, that it's some really wonderful skills, but for a person who has been through like emotional or psychological abuse, it can almost kind of walk that line of feeling like gaslighting. So um, it can feel more, well, and here's my kind of issue with it too, is the focus is on kind of being mindful of emotions so we can manage them. But something that survivors of abuse really need to do is the step before that, before managing them, which is acknowledging and accepting our feelings, kind of placing appropriate blame where it belongs, and then allowing ourselves to actually feel those feelings. So there can be kind of this unintended invalidation that happens, in my opinion, that can happen with DBT. So it's just something to watch out for. I wouldn't, if you're going to go that route, which I do recommend, I think DBT is a fantastic therapy. Like I said, just kind of watch out for that. And those concerns may or may not be acknowledged or validated by whoever is leading the DBT group, because I think there's just a lot of, unless you've actually lived emotional and psychological abuse, it's difficult to understand. So the level of misunderstandings and invalidation is really high. Okay. Duchess of Essex asks, do I still support MGTOW even after the MGTOW attorney killed the U.S. judge's family? Let me kind of get that clear. I think that I am for kind of what I'm for men that are, and women that are choosing to truly go their own way, to kind of go against societal norms. If you want to stay single, if you, you live your life on your own terms. A lot of MGTOW, however, has grown into just complete entitlement and women hating extreme. So, it's kind of the irony of, for men that are going their own way, they sure are obsessed with women, right? They talk about them. They come down hard on them. There's a lot of focus and that kind of stuff. I absolutely don't support any type of hate or any of that. Male or female, I'm not in support of at all. But it's concerning to me that, and I think fringe groups tend to attract people that kind of disenfranchised and disillusioned people, and that's concerning. I guess where I try to come from, and where I try to come from is, I think there's a lot of men that are drawn to kind of the MGTOW movement that are hurt, that have been hurt, and their pain has gone invalidated and unheard for a long time. And this is, I think, unfortunately, one of the few resources out there that's where they feel accepted and acknowledged and supported. And that's concerning, just as a human being, I care about people, and it makes me sad that there's so much anger and hatred that's gone unprocessed, that's kind of found its home in some of these groups. And then they become very dangerous. Okay, let's see. Fatima is here. Hello, Fatima. I'm scrolling. Lisa says, okay, so I'm new to therapy after leaving my narcissistic ex who I was with for 15 years and have 2 children with. So it's my 4th week and and seem to feel like he's in my face now all of the time. Can you explain a little bit more about that? As far as, I mean, is he in your face all the time? Or why do you feel like he is? She says, I've gone 3 years without seeing him and now he's everywhere. Is it coincidence or do you think he's following you or what do you think that's about? Let's see. Jack was saying that he has CPTSD too, and DBT has done him a lot of good. And Mystique is saying, I definitely have CPTSD. Oh, wait, maybe this is a different situation I was thinking of. Iraq was saying, I'm being constantly harassed and stalked by this downstairs neighbor. She lives in the kind of the first floor apartment. She has people who do her bidding. She has flying monkeys. And I come to find out that my own mother has been secretly exchanging communication with her. There was this whole thing where she manipulated the law, and I had a felony level restraining order from her last year. I live in constant dis-ease or uneasiness. I celebrate my gray rock successes and all the education. I cannot go no contact with my parents as long as I live here. It's a nightmare. Both my parents are cluster B. Wow. Yeah, it does sound like you have a lot going on. Fatima is saying, I'm having trouble setting healthy boundaries with my sister. Every time I confront her about her behavior, I end up feeling guilty. Do you think it's because I am being too harsh on her? That's a great question. Of course, I'm not there, so I don't know if you are being too harsh on her. But I would say that you could, and I would recommend that you do, kind of given what's going on in your situation, to switch your approach from confronting her to empathizing or being compassionate with her. So like we talked about, I think it was last week, you don't need to fix all her you don't need to fix any of her problems. You don't need to do anything other than just kind of love and support her where she is in her process of understanding and healing. She's 13. She's going through a really, really difficult time. I know you care about her tremendously. So, and I know that you want to help. And it can be difficult setting boundaries, especially when people haven't had boundaries really set with them before, or they're young and there's kind of this, not a real healthy understanding of what that boundaries are appropriate. And just because somebody has limits doesn't mean that they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they're being mean. It just means that we all have our limits for things. So I guess kind of approaching her that way might help. Or perhaps opening, there's a couple of things. You could try opening, when you do have discussions with her or when you're setting boundaries, try opening that conversation with, sis, I love you so much. So that kind of gets her defenses, that just kind of gives her, puts her at ease, you know? And then when you're asserting yourself, like, I love you so much. I care about you. I care about your problems. I know you're hurting, but it's really late and I have to get to bed right now. Can we please pick up this conversation, tomorrow morning, or can we set some time aside tomorrow afternoon or whenever to talk about it? I really want to be present with you, but I've got to go to bed, or whatever the boundary might be, or whatever the reason might be. Okay, so hopefully I just somewhat answered that. Fatima says, so how can I set boundaries with her without her getting defensive or offended? So starting from that place um, of empathy, I know that you're wanting, you're wanting to talk about this. I know this is important to you. I understand. I really want to be there for you. So you're validating her. So the first words out of your mouth are like, I love you and I'm validating you. You are important to me. And then you're following that up with your boundary. That's in a tactful way. But I have to get to bed. It's late. I've got to work tomorrow. And then it's like a sandwich, right? And then you're following it up with, I do really want to have this conversation with you. It sounds like you're really struggling with this. Do you have time tomorrow or the next day or this weekend that we could talk more about this? I want to give you the attention that your issue needs, and I can't give that to you right now. So here's the other part too, with setting boundaries with people, is all we can do is be tactful with our approach. We can't control their feelings. So if a person is going to there's strategies, like I was mentioning, that we can do to try to prevent a person from getting defensive or offended. And that's basically by being tactful and empathetic and validating of where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, how they feel about our boundary, it's on them. So if you say, I just have got to go to bed, I'm so tired, and then she starts up with, I can't believe you're not going to stay up and listen to me. I would stay up and listen to you, and don't you care about me? I thought you said you cared about me and that you'd always be here for me, right? And you're like, guilt kind of a thing. And even though she might not mean it in a guilt-inducing way, she might mean it from a hurt feelings perspective, right? But then standing your ground and being like, I do love you. I do want to be there for you. I do want to listen to you, but it's 1:30 in the morning or it's 9:30 at night. I have got to get to bed. And this isn't about me not caring about you. This is about me needing to get to bed so I can function tomorrow. And then holding your ground, like, I want to be there for you. And I do love you. And I'm sorry that, that you're upset with me right now. Hopefully we can talk about that too tomorrow. It'll take some time, but I think when she realizes, that you're setting a boundary in a tactful, validating, empathetic way, it's learning a new dance, and hopefully she'll come around. She's young too, so she's got some time to kind of come around. Oh, that's a good idea. Duchess of Essex says, you can encourage your sister to journal her feelings and set up times that you can talk about them. That is a great alternative resource that would help your sister kind of in that moment of, yeah, you can get all this stuff, write all this stuff down, and then let's discuss it. I love it. Oh, that's right, Gareth. It's your birthday, isn't it? Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Huffle Mom says, I learned that I have rejection sensitive dysphoria That means my warning emotions, anger, fear, sadness, guilt are dialed up to 11. My narcissistic mother-in-law is being nice now. Help. So is what you're saying that now that she's being nice, your emotions of guilt are being way dialed up? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, um, your boundaries are your boundaries. And I know it takes a lot of time and practice, but for the most part, they're pretty, I mean, granted, there are subtle differences between the different people we interact with, but kind of the core, like the core sense of values and boundaries are still there. So I guess I would just encourage you to stick to what you need. And that if that relationship has it, if it can be toxic, or if there is that imbalance there, knowing that, like, you can't be driven by that fear, obligation, or guilt. And if you find that you are, then that's time to take a step back and figure out, okay, how you need to reevaluate. How can I interact with her from a place of interest, dare I say, and not from a place of guilt? So how can you be around her and enjoy her company to some level and still remain emotionally safe? And like we've talked about before, that might be you limit your phone conversations to 15 minutes. Maybe you just text. Maybe you see her for lunch once a month instead of every day. Figuring out where your limits are. Fatima asks, how about dealing with spitefulness or grudges? Like, even though they love you, they still hold grudges against you and they're spiteful against you. How should you deal with that? Are we talking about your sister still? I guess regardless of who we're talking about, we're talking about two different things. Grudges, both of which are punishing behavior, especially like if a person's holding a grudge against you, then and if you're setting a boundary, an appropriate boundary of, this is where, this is where I start and end, and this is where you start and end. And, you have that separation. If we're talking about your sister, it's kids in general tend to still struggle with this. This is like a developmental thing that they're going through. So especially with younger teenagers, there is that level of self-absorption and narcissism. It's just part of development where it's kind of all about them. So there's also that at play. But if you're having a boundary and it's appropriate, and she's upset because she didn't get her way, she thinks, well, you should have stayed awake and talked to me all night long because I needed you to. That's not a reasonable boundary or expectation. I'm sorry. That's not a reasonable expectation on her end. So I think kind of knowing what's a reasonable boundary to have and basically reasonable boundaries have to do with us not trying to control another person. So, she's trying to dictate your time. You're saying, I can't do this. And she's trying to make you feel guilty and doing things her way. She's going to be upset because she's coming from that place of entitlement. And a lot of it is that teenage mindset where it's just, it should all be about me. My problems are the most significant, and I'm in crisis right now, and you're my sister. And if you say you love me, then you'll you'll swim across an ocean for me, that kind of a thing, which as we get older and we realize where boundaries are and like where we, start and stop and where others start and stop, that kind of level of unrealistic and inappropriate expectation that other people are going to take these Herculean efforts to go and be above and beyond for us whenever we need them to, that stops, because we realize that's not appropriate. I need to be able to be self-sufficient, and I need to be able to be self-moderating and self-soothing. So if I'm upset, I need to be able to figure out how to soothe myself instead of looking outside of myself for other people to make me feel a certain way, to make me feel calm or comfortable or loved or attractive or whatever. Like, that needs to come from inside, because it drains everybody around, because it's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. It just isn't, it's not long lasting. So if she's going to be mad, then I wouldn't, you might want to address it. I wouldn't let it change your approach with her, because it's something that she just needs to work through. If your boundary is appropriate and she's upset with that, then the solution isn't for you to get rid of your boundary to appease her. That's only going to perpetuate that bad behavior on her end. So continuing to hold your boundary and being just kind of loving and supportive with her. Like, I hear validating. I hear that you're upset. I know you're upset. I know you think that I'm being, mean and cruel and completely unreasonable, but my bedtime is, I don't know, 9:30, and I have to get up tomorrow, and, I want to be there for you. I want to, so you're kind of reiterating that you do care about her and that she is important, but this is still your boundary. And this isn't to punish her. And it's not because you don't love her. It's because that you're responsible for you first and foremost. And so you can't, overgive and overgive and overgive. It's just, that's not healthy. As far as spitefulness, I guess, what are we talking about? Like her saying kind of hateful, hurtful things? Or are we talking about her, I don't know, putting shampoo in your coffee? Like, what level of spitefulness, or worse, what kind of behavior are we talking about here? Absolutely. Bonnie was saying, yes, inner locus of control is way better than having an outer locus of control. Yes. And again, this stuff's not taught. So but when our awareness is brought to it, it can be absolutely game changing. And so the inner locus of control versus an external locus of control is one of those things that's life changing. Inner locus of control is the feeling that, hey, you know what? I'm steering the ship. I have appropriate control over the things that I have control of in my life. I don't have control over everything, but I know what I do have control over, and I know what I don't have control over. And the things that I do have control over, I work on. External locus of control is the feeling of, well, I'm not in control at all. Events, things, they just happen to me. And that's a difficult way to live, because it's just luck. Something good happens to you, woo! Something bad happens to you, then a person starts feeling like they're a lightning rod for problematic people or for bad luck, or they don't see, because they don't realize that how much power and control they have in their life, that they can effectively impact change, that they can change the course of direction in their life, and they can take action, like they're capable of that. So kind of thinking about that, where are we placing our power? Is it inside of ourselves, or is it outside of ourselves? Or maybe it's a little bit of both. but it's definitely worth examining if it's coming from outside of ourselves, you know, uh, why? Where is that coming from? A real common example that I know you guys have heard time and again on these live streams is when people say, how do I stop attracting narcissists? So that's a great example of external locus of control. I don't know, man. I'm just attracting them. It's like I'm a giant light bulb and these moths are just coming at me. How do I stop this? And an internal locus of control would say, you know what? I can't control who's going to be attracted to me and who's not going to be attracted to me. That's outside of my control. So trying to spend my time focusing on that and trying to micromanage who is attracted to me is an exercise in futility and just a fantastic waste of energy and effort. And it only tends to further lead to those feelings of this kind of learned helplessness, which goes hand in hand with that external locus of control of, I don't have control over this. No matter what I do, I just keep attracting narcissists. And like I was saying, the reality is we can't control who we attract, but we can control who we let into our lives and to what level and for how long. And that's all any of us can do. So kind of noticing, how are we talking about the different events in our life? Is it things happening to us? Oh, I'm just attracting this. Or is it, I have the ability to choose who is in my life and to what degree and to how and for how long. Very powerful stuff. Okay. Let's see, okay, Fatima's saying, yes, I was talking about my sister. Huffle Mom was saying with her mother-in-law, she says, I don't feel guilty. I just feel nervous. We had some boundaries in place. I relaxed a few of them because she was behaving, but I'm more nervous than a feral cat. I suck at gray rock. Well, it sounds like your feelings of nervousness are appropriate, given that you have a long-standing history of her crossing boundaries and behaving badly. So, but I guess realizing that your boundaries, all of our boundaries are in a state of ebb and flow. So, okay, you know what? She was behaving appropriately. And so that was our response to her. The boundary kind of just moved this way. So we let out some more leash or rope, I guess. That's probably a better way to say it. We let out some more rope. And now we're kind of nervous. Like, what's she going to do? What's she going to do? And that's part of it. That's part of the process of having these kind of experimenting with our boundaries. Like, this is where the boundary's been for the past 10 years. Well, now she's seeming like maybe she has changed somewhat. We can let out a little bit of rope. We'll kind of wait and see. And now you're just in that wait and see mode. And then her behavior will show you if you need to kind of rein some of that rope back in, or if you can keep it where it's at and then go from there. But I don't know if there's any, there's no cure for normal. So the feelings that you have are normal given your history with her and given the situation. I think it's more of an issue of how do, kind of what now? How are you going to handle those feelings of appropriate nervousness when they arise? And if these feelings of nervousness continue, then that too is a sign of, okay, maybe we need to reel the rope in just a little bit. Because remember, if your North Star is kind of what is nourishing for you, what is any situation that causes perpetual confusion, perpetual mental anxiety, mental anguish. These are not situations that we need to be staying in for any length of time. So if you're kind of willing to walk this line of an experience of mental anguish because you're trying to have a different relationship with her, realizing, okay, but I don't need to just sit here in mental anguish indefinitely because her behavior is appropriate now. It's okay to be like, you know what? Her behavior's appropriate, but there's still everything that she's done in the past hasn't been resolved. Maybe, I don't know, she probably, I'm guessing, probably hasn't been accountable for it, hasn't uh, made amends, hasn't done the work to rebuild the relationship. So even though her behavior in the moment is appropriate, there's still a ton of things that are unresolved. So it's appropriate for you to not completely feel comfortable around her. And if you don't think you're ever going to get that resolution, then it's also okay to kind of pull that rope back in a little bit to be like, you know what? It's great. It's great that her behavior is a little bit better now, but at the same time, I really value having peace in my life, and I try to limit the level of mental anguish and discomfort that I have to go through. So, and you don't have to go through this, right? This is a choice. So, kind of knowing that, uh, figuring out, okay, where is your line? Like, where is your level of comfort? And then reeling things back a little bit. And maybe that involves, if it's because it's your mother-in-law and maybe Jack is trying to have a different relationship with her, maybe the level of comfort means that when she comes over, that you stay for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, and then you go for a walk or you leave or you get gardening or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just kind of give yourself some breathing room. Those are just some thoughts. Okay. That's exciting. Gareth is saying, tomorrow I have the next part of starting my online businesses. Super fast internet, much needed. I am so excited. Oh, I'm so excited for you too. That's awesome. What a great birthday present, huh? Yeah, Huffle Mom, I agree. She says, talking to Fatima, she says, your sister has a whole lot of kind of these narcissistic fleas or traits of dysfunctional behavior uh, as a result of dysfunctional dysfunctional coping methods that come from other forms of dysfunctional behavior or as a result of other dysfunctional behavior. Anyways, she says, in my opinion, you need to have healthy boundaries with her as well as with your folks. There needs to be things that you won't put up with. Yes. And this is the challenge with, uh, I guess it's a different set of challenges with different people that play different roles in our lives and that are at different ages. It's it's difficult with children when they haven't had when there's been so much going on in a family system, when there really haven't been healthy boundaries, expectations, or standards set, when all they've been role modeled and expected, they've been kind of programmed. When we enter a family, uh, as a child, you don't have a lot of say. You're just boom, one day you're there. And then everybody else they're used to the way that they all interact. And you're kind of just expected to go along with it. It's different when we go out and we start our own family and then we're kind of steering the ship. Right. But if we're kids and we just enter a family, we don't have any say or any control. Point being is when kids grow up around a lot of dysfunction, they don't know any different. And or the vast majority of time, they don't know any different. And even if they realize something's wrong, oh, geez, mom and dad, they're abusive or they're neglectful or whatever it is, they have some awareness that, hey, something's not right here, but they're not going to have that full level of awareness of, oh my goodness, yes, um, uh, they might know, okay, mom yells a lot, so there's verbal abuse. Mom's very aggressive with her communication, but they might not realize what it looks like for somebody to be assertive. I refer to this as kind of getting our sea legs when we're learning a new way of doing things. It's awkward. We tend to go far one way, and then kind of, then the boat lurches and then we go far the other direction because we're trying it out because it's new for us. So when a person comes from a family where issues are handled with a lot of yelling and screaming and belittling or fear and intimidation, they pick up ways of how they respond to that. So kids either tend to shut down completely, they become passive, they shut down completely, they become passive aggressive, which is like the spiteful behavior you're talking about. Um, it's sort of like they're in agreement, but then they'll go, put shampoo in your coffee kind of a thing, or worse. Or they become aggressive and then they're passive, they're passive, they're passive until they lash out and then they become attacking and hateful and hurtful. Or if they don't go from passive to aggressive, they might just go straight to aggressive. And this is one of the challenges that therapists have when they're working with kids is, um, it's really vital for, there's kind of this window of time that these behaviors can be corrected, and it's challenging. So, and plus you've got, factoring in hormones and everything else. And of course, kids, when you're under your parents' roof, there's that level of powerlessness. So there is this kind of external locus of control in a lot of ways. Kids don't have the ability to necessarily leave the relationship. They don't have money, they don't have a job. There's so many different dynamics at play when we're talking about kids living at home. So there is so I'll have to think. I'm drawing a blank right now on the program. I recently read a book that was fantastic, and it was about working, or at least understanding, but mainly working with children who had like attachment disorders and kind of behavioral outbursts, mainly like, reactive attachment disorder or oppositional defiant disorder. But with that said, the core of this book with how to work with kind of difficult or defiant people was fantastic. And I'm just, what was that? He had a whole process and it was absolutely fantastic. I want to say it started with the P. Oh, what's going to bug me? But basically, it involved um, kind of acknowledging or validating their behavior, whatever they're doing. Okay, it looks like you're really hurt, or it looks like you're really upset. And then, uh, and it's not arguing with them. So you're just valid. And this is really difficult to do because especially with some kid, and of course it's difficult to do if it's your own family, but I think, was it Pace? Let me look that up real quick. Maybe it was Pace. That doesn't sound right. Yes. Yes, it is. Okay. It's play is that right? Playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And this is the core way of communicating and behaving with the goal of making a child feel safe. The the playfulness has to do with that's outside of conflict. So it's basically developing this connection with kind of this person who's acting in ways that are very difficult or defiant. So you're basically developing this rapport with them, and um, in your tone with them is is either kind of from a place of play. It's from a place of playfulness, or it's from a place of empathy. There is no lashing out or kind of coming at them strong. It's very gentle, because the whole goal is to decrease that level of defensiveness, so that that they can realize, like, there has to be that connection first before like behavioral correction can happen, I guess you could say. So kind of that rapport, the acceptance. The A stands for acceptance, which has to do with just accepting how they feel, even though it might not be appropriate. Like we were saying before, the example of your sister wanting to talk to you. She's got an issue. It's 2:30 in the morning. You've got to get up the next day. You've got to get up in like 6 hours, 5 hours, right? Um, even though like her expectation isn't reasonable, to realize, to accept her feelings of, she gets, you say, I've got to get to bed. She gets hurt, and maybe I don't know, does something, right? She knocks over something on her way out of the room. Acknowledging to her and accepting the way that she feels. You seem really hurt and really upset that I can't stay up and talk to you. So you're not arguing with her. You're just acknowledging how you think she's feeling in that moment. And then the curiosity, the C, stands for kind of getting curious about, and this could be, down like the next morning kind of a thing, but getting curious, I wonder, where is that coming from? Where is all of this hurt and this frustration and this anger coming from? Like, I love you and I want to be there for you, but I had to get to bed. So what do you think this is about? And then empathy is, basically putting yourself in her shoes. So having in this, again, like I said, this can be very, very challenging. And the situation or the example that I'm giving right now is probably significantly more on the mild end than what most people tend to experience. Um, Kind of with this technique, or with difficult or defiant um, children, especially. It's hard. There's foster families um, who must just seriously just be angels in disguise, because kids that are on the extreme end, that have reactive attachment disorder, they because for them closeness equals danger. So they just don't want, they've never had a healthy bond with anybody. They don't want to get close to anybody. They feel threatened when they start feeling close, and then they start really acting out. And it can just push the sanest person to the fringe, to the edge. It's very difficult. And I'm not saying this is your sister, but I'm just saying with this technique in general. But it's a fantastic technique to, I think, really for conflict with most people um, that have some degree of the ability to be reasoned with, I guess. Okay, let me scroll down here. And Jack was saying, um, he says, yeah, helpful mom speaks from experience on my own narcissistic fleas and bad coping habits. I still react and speak in manipulative and self-hating ways. Yes. And this is, I think so many of us do. I mean, society is dysfunctional. Even if we grew up in a functional home and had completely functional friends and learned all about this, there's just really no escaping the dysfunction, especially because this stuff's not taught. So I mean, come on. There's nobody that I've ever come across, for sure, myself included, who has had a solid grasp on this and has been able to effectively navigate this line through life. No one, not even close. So that's kind of this whole level of self-awareness and this journey to self-awareness and to healing, I think it's a journey that we all are on, but just to different degrees. And if we're serious about, and it's difficult, it's really difficult to do that work of reflecting on our behavior because it involves pain. We cringe. We're like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe like I said that or did that or used to think that way," or um, we get defensive or embarrassed, or there's shame or guilt or um, all kinds of uncomfortable emotions that surface when we look at our behavior. And it doesn't even have to be that long ago. It could be, I cannot believe I just did that like 10 seconds ago. I cannot believe I handled it like that. That is not the kind of person I am or that I want to be. Where did that come from? And that's hard. It's hard for any of us to admit that we made a mistake or that we want to do something different or that we don't have a certain skill down. I mean, there's many, many, many times where um like that inner critic. Oh, was it last week? Last week, I decided at the last minute, um, I changed my skincare routine and my face was really oily, my bangs were really oily. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to use some dry shampoo in my bangs to absorb the oil that's coming from my moisturizer. Instead, I grabbed the wrong bottle and I used it's dry oil spray. So my hair was disgusting. It was so oily. And of course I'm confused at first. What have I done? I realize what I've done. So then I have to use dry shampoo to absorb the dry oil on top of the oil. And anyways, it was comical. It was like a last minute thing. My hair felt so disgusting, and then here I am gonna go on live on the internet for like this video like, is, for all of time and talk to people about, uh, kind of, I don't know, living their best life or, um, kind of taking charge of their life. And so all my inner critic is like screaming at me, Dana, you just, I mean, what, you're going to go give life advice now? Like you just sprayed dry oil all over your hair. Like if anybody saw what you had just done, you know, nobody would listen to anything that comes out of your mouth. But the reality is we all make mistakes. We all do stuff. Um, we're all learning. It's just part of it. Uh, yes. Okay, let me scroll down here. Jack, oh, I meant to address this. Thank you for bringing this up. He says, Helpful Mom and I found out reading a recent book club book called Stop Walking on Eggshells. So much of it really hit close to home for me. Yes, that was the book club book for last month, which is way overdue. And I I honestly don't even I'd like to be able to do that book club in the next couple weeks because it is a good book and it does really lay out a lot of uh, problematic behaviors and kind of how to address them. Oh, okay. Let's see. Jack is saying Mystique has a question here. Oh, that is a good question. She says, Dana, what would be your favorite therapy choice for CPTSD and why? I guess it would depend on what we're talking about when it comes to CPTSD. If normally CPTSD, that's a mouthful to say, is um, tends to refer to childhood, like developmental trauma, in particular, like relationship trauma starting at a young age. Um, there really isn't a term for relationship trauma uh, for a person kind of 18 and older. So CPTSD, that term is also kind of used for relationship trauma. Sometimes it's called complex trauma, um, which is a little bit different. Well, I guess pretty significantly different than CPTSD. So I guess it depends. What I'm getting at is it depends on what what issues what issues need to be addressed. If we're talking in terms of, well, let me just back up. I guess my stance is coming from a place of this stuff's not taught. Because of that, I strongly believe that everybody has imbalances, in myself included, imbalances in their ways of thinking and behaving and emotional expression. So, because this stuff's not taught, I think it's fair to say that there's this developmental trauma that's present to some degree in all of us. And um, as far as a current treatment that I would recommend for it, just on learning kind of the foundational skills of what is appropriate communication, what are appropriate boundaries, um, just kind of the more cut and dry material. And I say that, but that's of course is not even that cut and dry because it kind of varies from culture to culture. So like there's wiggle room with between cultures and religions and that kind of thing. But kind of the more of the core information about um, what we know, I guess, that a research evidence-based practices on parenting, on attachment theory, on communication, on kind of healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships, these kinds of things. There isn't a the closest thing that I think comes that helps with that would be more of like a psychoeducational approach where it's literally a structured program. So this is one of the reasons I think DBT is so helpful for people because it's structured. There's it's it's a program. Everybody that goes through a DBT program goes through the same material. And I think that that's important and that's helpful because the challenge with therapy, especially therapy, is there's a lot of challenges. Uh, you could have 10, you could have 100 different practitioners that all say that they practice CBT, let's say, for example, and they all practice it in a very different way. So, or they think that they're practicing it and they're really not. The challenge with therapy is it tends to be a one-on-one situation. So there's nobody else in the room to say, hey, this isn't working right, or hey, that's a problem. And the other, like I said, there's a lot of challenges with this. The other challenge is the client, when they enter that session, they tend to think, oh, well, if a problem does come up, if they don't like how the session, if they have questions or concerns or frustrations, they tend to not say anything because they think, well, who am I? Right? That this professional knows best. And there's so much room for error and for problems to occur just with that piece of the puzzle alone. That's why I really like a more structured approach because it minimizes the potential for the kind of the human variable. The how different practitioners can be. Because even with like I said, with DBT, it's structured. So even with a really poorly trained practitioner, there's still that client, that patient is still going to walk away with some degree of proficiency and understanding of themselves and of emotional management. Whereas with other forms of therapy, a person could be in therapy for years and that needle doesn't move at all. And the practitioner um, might not know why, and the client might not know why. Or the practitioner thinks it's the client, it's not working hard enough, and maybe the client doesn't know what to do. Like there's too many uh, unnecessary variables that I think negatively impact a client's chance of success in therapy. So I guess long answer short, too late, I know. Um, Psychoeducation, getting information. This is where a lot of kind of self-help tends to come into play, reading books. But again, this is one of the reasons I started a book club, was because we all we come from we approach a book or any information based on who we are at the time, not so much based on the information, which is really weird when you think about it. So you could read a book and then 6 months later pick it up again, or 6 years later, and it's like a different book. It's weird. So, um, the problem with that is if you have people, like so many of us, who you're kind of your internal compass is not clear, and um, it's really easy to kind of get off course or to read things through that lens of dysfunctional programming and to misinterpret either what is being said, or sometimes there's books out there, there's some self-help books out there that are absolutely just pure trash, that are so damaging and so just ridiculous. And they can be written by experts, you know? So there's just kind of that's why I like book club, because it allows for people to discuss all of this as a group, and you can get a wide um, range of input on subject matter. Uh, so yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging. If okay, so then okay, expanding on that for CPTSD, if we're talking, um, and frankly, I really think that a lot of those core skills, that's foundational. That clears up so many other things. Not everything, but that clears up a lot. When people realize here's an appropriate expectation, here's an inappropriate expectation. When they realize this difference, or here's what enmeshed boundaries look like, here's what healthy functional boundaries look like, um, then other things kind of start to fall into place. So when a person's aware of, oh my gosh, you know what, my expectations, uh, for this person to drop everything and to stay awake all night talking to me, that's not a reasonable expectation. And if they're able to acknowledge that and be like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Like, we can talk about this tomorrow. That's going to change how they feel, and that's going to change how they behave. So these fundamentals, I really feel like that would shave years off of everybody's learning curve with this. The problem right now that I see with a lot of, well, with really anything, but like in terms of self-help or self-improvement, is it's a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach. And even then, like the bottom-up approach that tends to be used in therapy is um oftentimes makes connections that are quite a stretch, or frankly irrelevant, or not really helpful. Um, like, oh, you you married a man who's just as controlling as your mother, and then they're trying to sort all that out. But really, like, you could spend a lot of times, I don't know. There's some stuff I just feel isn't as helpful as um, a, a lot of therapists think it is, frankly. But anyways, the top-down approach is addressing issue by issue, and that's playing whack-a-mole, because you address one issue, another one's going to pop up. You address the other issue, the next one's going to pop up. So to me, the missing piece is teaching those fundamentals of functional and dysfunctional behavior. That, like I said, that like goes a long way, just the basics. In terms of emotional regulation, I do like a lot of what DBT has to offer. Pete Walker's book, The Tao of Fully Feeling, I think is fantastic. I would love to see that made into some sort of program that ideally would come before DBT, because that's needed. It's needed to actually feel feelings and grieve and uh, learn about feelings before we can even manage them. So that's a part of it. Let's see, kind of working in terms of, if we're talking about trauma, even still, like a lot of the trauma responses that people struggle with, I think can be addressed and resolved with more of psychoeducation. Most of the trauma responses have to be like, what's wrong with me? I can't trust other people. Or um, they understandably, I mean, I was there too. I get it. Like getting tangled up in all of these disempowering messages about love and commitment and family and friends and um, just all of these toxic messages. So once I guess I have found that most people, their relationship or their understanding of emotions, they think that they're a lot more neurotic than they actually are. Just like with Huffle Mom, she was saying, I just have this ongoing sense of nervousness around this person that I can't trust. Like, well, okay, that's appropriate. Everything's working fine. Like there's nothing that, there would be something wrong if she didn't feel that way. Like that's it's an uncomfortable response, but it's an appropriate response given the history that she has, because nothing's been resolved. Right. So just like if I drank 3 pots of coffee and was having trouble sleeping, like, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Like that tends to go hand in hand. Or if you were in you were in a relationship with somebody who was not even a pathological liar, who deceived you or cheated on you or had lied to you, and you were deeply caught off guard by that and wounded by that, you're going to have trouble trusting other people because of that, because your brain has now learned the lesson that some people can claim to love you while they're hurting you in the process. And that's a really terrifying, terrible lesson to learn, you know? Um, but in that type of situation, what frustrates a lot of people is, again, it's this misinformation. It's this idea of, well, then to truly trust or to truly heal involves going back to the way that I was, trusting completely and deeply, pretty much right away. It doesn't work like that. Thankfully, it doesn't work like that, because it's not supposed to work like that, right? We're supposed to be able to, appropriate trust, emotional safety with another person. That's something that's grown and developed and cultivated over time with them having trusting, appropriate behavior. That there is no shortcut to that. So, like I said, most of the time people, they get so upset with themselves because they're not the way that they were, but that's not saying that the way that they were was necessarily healthy or well adjusted. And because most of us aren't, because we grow up in a dysfunctional society. I hope that was a really long response. I hope that somewhere in that answered your question. Actually, let me add to it a little bit more. I apologize. If we're talking about trauma, more of a a severe emotional dysregulation and that kind of behavior, then I would say the therapy I would recommend is EMDR. So that one is evidence-based. It's shown to be effective for treating trauma. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. Misty, she says, "Thank you so much. You gave me so much to think about." You are so welcome, and, uh, like I said, I hope that somewhere in there that y you're able to pull something worthwhile out of that. I apologize for kind of that, like, stream of consciousness there. Let's see, scrolling up, scrolling up. James says, "Dana, do you remember the Dave Chappelle show about when keeping it real goes wrong?" Yes, I yes, I loved that, what was segment or skit that he used to do. What made you think of that? Uh, let's see here. Let's see. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. That's a great analogy, Gareth. I agree. He's talking to Jack. He says, it takes serious discipline to cure CPTSD. It's sort of like Jedi training, and that's not a joke. Yes, it absolutely does, because it's learning a whole different way of being and interacting with ourselves and with the world. And it's a practice. There really, I guess, kind of thankfully, there is no finish line. Like, I know that can feel really overwhelming, like, oh, great, but it's this constant process of getting our lives into alignment. And I think the reason there is no finish line with it is because we're continually as people growing and changing and entering new chapters of our life and closing out the old ones. And um, we're always trying to kind of find where is the healthy balance for me now? Like, okay, how about now? Okay, how about now? So it's just going to keep changing. So it doesn't ever end. But there does come a point where once we get over that initial hurdle and we've made a handful at least of some of these more significant changes, or adjustments, I should say, where we're getting things more in balance with our relationships with others, becoming more comfortable with being assertive, um, with communication, with boundaries. We're understanding that we don't have to just sit in a place and be tormented by other people, or we don't have to um, you know like, be continually forgiving or allowing of their bad behavior, or we don't have to keep them in our lives as active parts of our life just because they're family if they're hurtful to us, or um, all, like, we learn how to become self-protective, I guess. And it's a process, uh, but it does become significantly easier over time. In that, I would think there is, if we can approach ourselves with compassion and curiosity, kind of like that PACE method I'd mentioned earlier, if we can use that with ourselves, it makes the process that much more, um, at a minimum, tolerable, because we're not coming from a place of judgment. We're coming from a place of curiosity. of, like we were talking about earlier, you catch yourself like interacting with somebody in a way that you're just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I lost my temper, or I cannot believe, um, I was so rude, or um, that this one thing upset me. So I just can't, you're just shocked by your own behavior. Those kinds of things, if you can examine your behavior from a place of compassion and curiosity, it's going to soften your defenses, and you'll be able to better understand it and examine it and then do something different next time. Versus if we start getting defensive about it, and it's hard, like we all have blind spots to ourselves, especially because we're so close, and we all feel justified in the actions that we take. Human beings were designed, we're hardwired for that. It's cognitive resonance. We're designed for our thoughts and our actions to be in alignment. And that can be problematic when we have problematic thoughts or we have problematic actions, because something's got to give to line those two things up. So that's how dysfunctional behavior is justified by ourselves or by other people. Um, but it can be really difficult to admit that we didn't handle something well, or that, whatever, and to actually be willing to work on it to change. So yeah, it absolutely is. When people talk about doing the work of healing or recovery in general, this is what they're talking about. It's it's taking the blinders off, and it's being honest with ourselves. It's and eventually being honest with other people, right? Um, in a tactful way, of course, but it's seeing our behavior clearly, and then ideally from a place of compassion and curiosity so we can work to improve it. But it's difficult. It's uncomfortable and it's difficult, and there's a lot of other emotions that surface, a lot of shame and embarrassment and guilt and regret and all of that we have to kind of wade through, um, as those realizations surface. Okay, let me scroll. Oh, James is saying, uh, the Dave Chappelle skit. He said, "I thought of Dave Chappelle when you talked about some of those books by experts." It says, "You were just keeping it real." Yeah, and we're probably rocking the boat a little bit in the process, which does have its, downside for sure. Yeah, Huffle Mom says, "We're like plants. A healthy plant never stops growing. If it stops growing, it's usually unhealthy." Well said. Yep, I agree. Gareth is saying, "Yeah, serious discipline to evolve." Yeah, absolutely. And down the road, um, when and this is only an exercise that I would recommend people doing when there's been long-standing, um, what am I looking what's the word I'm looking for? Emotional trust, emotional support, emotional safety. When emotional safety has been established for a long period of time, one of the ways, uh that can help kind of, accelerate our growth and understanding is to ask somebody that we trust deeply, that we know will be tactful, and maybe even to preface it. Like, "I'm really interested in working on my personal growth. I'm sure that there's areas that I of my personality that I'm not seeing clearly, and, um, you know, what what 3 areas would do you think I should work on? Or, what is one area that you think could use some improvement? It's very interesting when you're asking that of somebody that you respect and you know that they have no weird conscious or subconscious agenda, that it's just, honest feedback. It can be really helpful. But like I said, it really requires that level of emotional safety and, uh, solid communication with that other person for that to happen. Let's see. JJ is asking me a question about another channel. I have no idea who that person is. Um, let's see. Oh, Erock was saying EMDR for complex PTSD too. It helps with more of like the processing of the trauma response. But again, I think it truly healing from trauma involves, not everybody's trauma is the same, right? So everybody's going to have different symptoms of trauma. Some people are going to be very emotionally reactive. Some people are going to be very emotionally withdrawn. Some people, their shift in attachment style might go from um, anxious to avoidant, or um, it might go from secure to anxious. So they, I mean, there's lots of different. So even though like there's one kind of diagnosis, and CPTSD isn't even a diagnosis in the DSM. So it's not even it's just PTSD. So, to lump all trauma in a kind of a very vague, in a very large umbrella of these are kind of the chronic symptoms, and there's different categories of symptoms and all that, but it's still there's a lot of range between each person. Um, I think personally, from what personally and professionally, from what I've heard and what I've seen, EMDR tends to work better for that trauma response. I still think everybody. So I guess what I'm saying is, I personally feel everybody could benefit from the like psychoeducational component of. This is just the foundation of how to live kind of a happy, healthy, well-adjusted life. Like, like this is just the foundational skills. Um, everybody could benefit from that, but not everybody is going to benefit from uh, necessarily EMDR or would even need EMDR. I also think part of that core, if I had a magic wand, part of that kind of core foundational curriculum would also involve DBT. It's fantastic. Emotional management and mindfulness and, um, you know, all that. It's important. I would consider that to be a fundamental and important life skill. So, but I don't think, EMDR isn't going to fill in the gaps of that are left by dysfunctional programming. So if a person's still, and like I said, because I have yet to come across a person that doesn't have some like major potholes in their thinking. So, and again, myself included. So, um, EMDR, medication, that's not going to solve those issues. Only psychoeducation is going to solve those problems. Okay, let me scroll. let's see. Let me scroll. Yes, I agree. James was saying the wrong book can put people in a state of spinning their wheels and getting sidetracked. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I agree completely. Um, let's see where was that? Yeah, E-Rock was saying, yeah, because there are several traumas and it could be very compounded. Yeah, we can mix and match things that would work for us individually. Yes. I I think that would be a great way to do it. Like there's different modules and um you know, I think there could be a kind of an assessment done where it's like, okay, based on what you're reporting, then I don't know, modules 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 would be really helpful. And maybe modules 1 and 3 to be done first, and then, you know, different modules like they build because the skills build on each other, right? So having them also kind of organized in a way that they build and that they make sense. And that way, you know, there isn't this um, you know, kind of inadvertent like sidetracking or um, going down the wrong rabbit hole because that's really easy to do. And then I also think just having the honest conversation with people of here's the deal. Like we're all on this journey. Nobody has it figured out 100%. If anybody claims that they do, avoid that person because they don't. And um so that being said, this information like hold on to what helps and let the rest go. If you have and then just we need to have this open discussion and dialogue of this information and to not have this idea of um that the clinician or whoever is giving you this information knows best and that you don't. Like I really feel it needs to be, uh, you know, it's just a relationship. Like there needs to be like that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication that's from both sides. And there maybe needs to be some sort of like process for ongoing feedback to see if the process is working. So yeah. Oh, let's see. Kenneth says, I think it's unfair after so much time passes that an abuser can't be held responsible anymore. I agree. I think it's one of the hardest, most challenging things with child abuse is, you know, a child and even abuse with adults. There it's not like a random attack. There's so many other emotions involved and there's so much confusion and shame and fear and all kinds of things that a person has to work through before they can even think about coming forward. So it's a long process, and that's one of the challenges with, you know, convicting people that have hurt children, um, you know, especially if it's been a long time. And not to mention, what bothers me is I don't think that there should be statute of limitations on that. Like if there's proof out there that yes, indeed, this person has caused harm to others, then that should be valid proof forever. I don't think that that should somehow expire. I think that's ridiculous. Let's see. I'm scrolling. JJ, oh, that's interesting. JJ asks, well, what about those who say narcissism is good, that it is the right way of being, and it's us weaklings that are the problem? Well, like we've talked about before, there's that difference between healthy narcissism and pathological narcissism. Healthy narcissism being that ability, that knowledge of, hey, I've got value, I matter, like, why not me? Why not now? Kind of a thing. Pathological narcissism, when it starts moving down that continuum, then that's more of I matter and nobody else does. It's all about me, right? And it just keeps going. It's all about me at the expense of you. It's all about me at the destruction of you. It's all about me at the death of you. So that level of entitlement, the further you get on that spectrum, the more that level of entitlement and um, you know, and by default destruction is present. Because if we're driven by basically by the id, right? By the kind of the immediate wants and needs, that that kind of by definition, like that tends to be uh short-term solutions and short-term thinking. That's not conducive for the growth of anything. There has to be so no, I um healthy narcissism, yes, that's how we're able to be self-protective, we're able to have set goals, we know our wants and needs, we're able to assert them, but we're also coming from that mindset of being team oriented. Yeah, why not me? Why not now? But hey, man, why not you? Like, I'm feeling good enough with myself that I can see the strengths within you. I can celebrate your successes. I'm not constantly threatened by the success or happiness of other people. Like, it's more of, when we're feeling good about ourselves and we're feeling somewhat reasonably in control with our life and all of that, we're coming from that place of abundance of we're not feeling threatened. We can work as a team, all of that. It's when that ego is dysfunctional and stunted that's when problems really begin. And then that person never grows up. It's a very immature, damaged sense of self, and by default, a damaged way of understanding and relating to the world. So, um, yeah, I mean, somebody that has that mindset, immature mindset, who's very in the moment thinking, or they're all like, I'm just going to get mine, even if they're a little bit longer term thinking, like if I'm talking like a methodical sociopath, right? Um, it, it to me, it's just so short term still, even if they're even like the Bernie Madoffs of the world, where they're playing the long game kind of a thing. It's like, dude, if you have like if you have that time and the intelligence to craft this whole scheme, you could do that in a way that's honest, and then it would be sustainable. So to me, doing things the wrong way is never sustainable. And even if nobody found out, you're always looking over your shoulder. I just that why? That sounds horrible. Like, what a horrible way to live. Um, So it might work in the moment, but here's the thing too, with healthy narcissism, we're not weaklings. It's this aggressive behavior. Oh, how does the saying go? Like, violence is the weak person's version of strength. And I agree completely. It's reactive. It's in the moment. It versus, um, I think a truly strong person and a mature person is able to shift out of being reactive to being responsive. So but again, like the people that are like, oh yeah, this is what it means to be strong. It means to be strong means you got to get yours and you got to put yourself first and, you know, would stomp on the little guy if you need to. And you don't show emotion and, you treat other people like garbage and, F them. It's all about you. That to me is exactly what a person who is fear-based and immature and um, who that's how they get through life. So, yeah, like I would expect them to say that, "Oh man, you're a sucker for, you know, for working as a team or kind of uh, not trying to put yourself first or whatever." But okay, well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. But historically speaking, like those that tend to do things working as a team, seeking that kind of win-win, solution to things, they tend to live a more happy, healthy, well-adjusted, sustainable life. That's what contributes to the growth of societies. So like, I'm not gonna spend my time trying to convince somebody, you know, that their way is wrong because it's a way you're just screaming into the wind. It's a waste of time. Um Oh, totally. JJ says, I agree. I was naive and I think probably did reactive abuse, the yelling back. I wish I knew how to stay calm back then. This was a long time ago. Thank you. Oh, yeah, me too. I hear you. This goes back to um, being open, examining our own behavior from a place of curiosity and compassion. Because, yeah, I think we've all had times where, it's like, oh, you just shake your head. Oh man, I could write a book on just the stupid, crazy things I've done over the years. When I was a teenager, I would take unnecessary risks because I thought it was, um, like, I don't know if I thought it was cool, but it just there was no um, long-term thinking that went into it. Um, I guess it made me feel like in control, or it made me feel tough, kind of a thing. I'm talking stupid stuff, like s and just not okay, like, really not okay, like, speeding up behind somebody's car and with the intention of, "Oh, I'm gonna freak them out. I'm just gonna get really close to their" not that I did this a lot. I had a friend who did this a lot. I only did this a couple times. Or I would, um, uh, just, stupid stuff. There was one time I picked up a hitchhiker, um, because I was trying to scare a friend of mine. I thought it would be funny because she didn't think I would really do it. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to show her. And it thankfully we survived it. It was a really scary experience. And, you know, um, the things I used to do thinking, oh, this means I'm tough. When in reality, I'm like, no, that's just dumb. It's not tough at all. Tough people don't do things like that. Dumb people do, but not tough people. Ah, ay, ay, ay. Yes. Um, Helpful Mom was saying the mature way to be healthily narcissistic is to remember to take care of yourself first so that you have more to pass out to other people. It's like making dinner for a crowd. You got to save some for you. Yep. Yep, I agree. And back to the JJ, your comment about the reactive abuse thing. I did that too. I thought causing a scene or setting people, I confused being aggressive with being assertive. And there were quite a few, no, I don't know, quite a few, a handful of times where um, I thought, well, I'm just going to set somebody straight. Right? I'm going to let them have it. And that was me standing up for myself. That's all I knew back then. And now I realize, no, that's when we don't know how to have boundaries and we don't know how to assert ourselves tactfully, then we default to aggressiveness, because that's the aggressiveness is the only way we know how to set that boundary with other people. And again, coming from that place of um, I think more of that healthy narcissism, we're also realizing, gosh, you know what? This other person's behavior isn't a reflection of me. This jerk, I don't know, cut me off in traffic. The old me was, was like tailgating or whatever, and cut me off in traffic or what have you, and called me names. I don't need to like defend my honor. I don't need to go set them straight. I don't need to rear in their car or follow them home or yell back at them in order to um, settle the score. Their behavior has nothing to do with me. So they're having a bad day, or that person's just really hot-headed or whatever. And when you don't take things personally, I think it's so much easier to just detach from it. Cause then you're like, okay, dude, whatever. And my brother does such a great job with this kind of stuff. He really does. He rolls with things so well and has really learned to just not get roped into discussions that are just going to wind up with frustration and um just kind of like, yeah, whatever. He's so good about that. I think I was telling you guys this story when my dad was sick, um towards the tail end of his life. Had gone to Houston, and my dad was having issues with his printer, and he was going to order a new one. Anyways, my dad and I spent all this time looking at his printer, and I kept saying, Dad, the issue is you're using the off brand, like the generic ink cartridges, and certain printers won't print because of that, because it's, uh, you know, they want to get money out of you. And anyways, we're going back and forth. And anyway, we finally end up getting it to print. Okay. And like, my dad couldn't admit that we didn't need to order a new printer. Not like the printer is now working. And so we're, we're squabbling about it because of like all the things that we could be doing, all of the things that we could spend time doing. Now you got to go out and get a freaking printer. Like, what? And so I'm all wrapped up in it and I'm trying to get my way. I just want my dad to just not buy a new printer, and we don't need it. It's ridiculous. What are we doing here? Kind of a thing. And my brother walks in like during all of this, and my dad's getting upset. I'm getting upset with him. And so Victor, my brother, walks in. He's like, "Hey, so what's going on?" And my dad's like, "Oh, we need to order a new printer." And so I'm like, "No, we don't. It's fine. It's Dad was using the generic cartridges, blah blah." And Victor's like, "Yeah, okay, let's order a new printer." Just turns around and walks out. Like, doesn't get phased at all. Doesn't get phased at all because he knows it's a losing battle. Like, there's no point. My father, bless his heart, y- you know, um, he just had to have it done that way. And I was wasting my time and his time and energy and all of these emotions trying to wrestle him down into just seeing, okay, no, the printer's fine. We don't need to order a new one. Like, nope. Just bypass that fight. It's jumping over those situation, when you just realize you're screaming into the wind, to just realize it and drive on. Like, you don't need to prove your point. It doesn't, my dad not wanting to believe me, even though I was showing like, hey, now this works and blah, blah. It didn't mean that I'm stupid. It didn't mean that he didn't trust me. It didn't mean that I was wrong. It didn't mean um, that I was right. It didn't mean anything other than he had it in his mind that he wanted to get a new printer. That's it. So, okay. So with that said, let's see, let me scroll up. Um, That's a really great point, Jessica. She says, any advice for navigating dating after a history of dating narcissists? Narcissists put in effort to make you feel special, which I like, but it comes with a price. And regular men tend to put in no effort. The answer is find a regular guy who does put in effort. Like they are out there, but they don't have it turned up to 11, which a lot of narcissists and problematic people do. They're very quick, and I think they're very quick to hone in on us and to make us their whole world, and it's all of this attention and affection and intensity. And if if we don't see that as the problematic behavior that it is, we're mistaking that like intensity for sincerity, and then we're thinking that it's romantic and we get wrapped up in it. When we're dating from a place of when we're dating from a place of being lonely or having kind of these if we've been walking around for a long time feeling unloved or unimportant, we're going to gobble that up. If somebody's showering us with that intention and affection, you're starving. You're going to gobble it up. The way out of that is to be able to kind of feed yourself. So to build up a life that you love, to build up that hobbies that you love, friends that you love, and you keep your life. The relationship, any relationship in your life, it's something that we add to our life. We don't make it our whole life. It's when people make a relationship their whole life, um, then that's when it becomes a problem. And it's hard to leave relationships like that because then we're also leaving our whole world, right? If all of our friends, all of our hobbies, everything just is boom, like this other person, and we have no sense of self outside of this relationship, we've made this relationship our whole identity by accident, maybe. It's really that's one of the reasons people have a difficulty leaving these types of abusive relationships. One of many reasons. But so I guess seeing problematic behavior clearly, and there does come a point um, when, and I don't, and maybe it has to do with kind of like learning more about getting in tune with ourselves, learning what it really means to value ourselves, and um, knowing that we have worth, and that's not something we need to try to earn. And we have to know we have worth before we are able to guard it, I guess, kind of a thing. So, um, learning about boundaries, all of that, once we get in tune with what's nourishing for us, then the craving for things that are not nourishing becomes more prominent. We just, it kind of just loses its appeal. So, yeah, the that level, when we have a life, when you have a life that you love and you've got your hobbies and your friends and you're doing your own thing, and you're not dating from a place of scarcity or lack, um you're not looking for somebody to complete you. And so you value yourself, you value your energy and your emotions and your time and all of that. And so somebody who's coming into your life has to basically has to compete with that. Like you have got to bring so much to the table that I'm gonna share some of my time. like, and I don't mean that in just, I know it sounds really, I don't know, maybe pretentious or narcissistic even, but it's true, because it's sort of like whatever we say yes to, we're saying no to something else. So there's only so many hours in the day, and why give it give it away? It's not respecting our energy, our time, our emotions, any of that. So um yeah, so just love building a life that you love, and seeing love bombing for the problematic behavior it is. It's crazy. I look back at some of the people that I'd gone on, met on the internet or gone on some dates with, or even been in relationships with, and I just think, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even give that a second date now. I can't even believe like it got as far as it did. And it was because I was coming from a place of um, lack, of, oh, this attention and affection feels so good, even though it still felt uncomfortable. Like it was too much too soon. It was flattering, and it made me feel it. I was getting my self-esteem from outside of myself. Like it was making me feel like attractive or wanted, or less lonely. But it what knowing what I know now, I look back at that and I think, uh, I don't want anybody that would move um, like that. That would have such poor boundaries. That would be so quick to make me their whole world, because that shows that they've got some unresolved stuff too. So just, I guess what I'm saying is, over time, when we start seeing these whirlwind situations, whatever it is, friendships, um, relationships, businesses, you know, these things, it loses their appeal when you realize that everything is easy to get into and it's so much harder to get out of. And, um, if somebody's kind of so quick, so if they're so quick to move so quick, then they're also going to be so quick to switch course, because their emotions are very short term. It's very instant gratification, and there's not a lot of thought or like foundation behind that, and that's a problem. Kenneth, thank you. Kenneth, he says, for live stream donation, he says, I have learned more from this channel than I ever learned in school. I can't possibly thank you enough for what you do. Keep doing what you're doing and stay safe. Well, thank you, Kenneth. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm glad to meet you guys, and to um to meet fellow travelers on the path, kind of a thing. We're all trying to figure this stuff out, and it's nice to meet other people that are interested in it too. So, yeah. Ah, let me scroll here. Okay, so Jessica says, well, thank you. It's interesting because I feel more comfortable and able to let my walls down with narcissists. There's definitely some rewiring that needs to be done in my brain. Yes. Okay, so this is something that tends to take time and practice, but identifying these kind of damaged boundaries, um, that so many of us have, is a big first start. So I think for a long time, a lot of us didn't know that we had boundaries that needed work. We might have we were very, if we were coming from that place of being starved out for attention or affection, we were quick to hop into the whirlwind that somebody else was starting. Or we might even start the whirlwind and be like, oh, because we're operating from this fantasy place of, oh, this perfect person is so amazing, and this is so wonderful, and this is so quick, and oh my gosh, want to spend all this time with them, and we're, hey, let's just move in together, and because we're so starved out. So we're like, yes, let's just do all of this right now. And and then a few months later, we're like, oh my gosh, this person, we think they've totally changed, when the reality is they haven't changed. We're just now starting to see their behavior clearly. Whereas before they were on their best behavior, now they're actually getting comfortable and showing us who they are. Um, so we tend, narcissists tend to be very charming and kind of disarming. Uh, the more emotionally aware ones, I would say. Like there's the ones that are obnoxious, like that guy or gal at the party kind of thing that won't stop talking about themselves. Like that's obnoxious, right? We can kind of sense like that's just draining when that happens, and there's not, for most of us, I don't think that there's that much appeal to that kind of behavior, but it's the ones that they want to spend all their time with us, or if they're really listening to us, or if they're really kind of feeling this emotional um, void, or missing piece for us, then that's kind of that's where that appeal comes from. When we realize that we're moving too quick, that we're oversharing with people that we hardly know, um, or we're sharing information. I guess when we also understand the concept of emotional safety, and realizing that being an open book isn't a good thing. It's a sign of poor boundaries. And that there's things that everybody has. There are things that they're, I don't necessarily say vulnerabilities, but kind of soft spots. Everybody's got soft spots. Oh, they were bullied as a kid, or their mom or dad left when they were young, or these kinds of things where there's just these soft spots for them. Realizing that just because somebody asks us about the deepest parts of ourselves doesn't mean that we should or need to tell them. We don't owe anybody, you don't owe a person that answer. There's certain information about us that is on a need to know basis, and it comes from that emotional safety being established first. So it's completely okay to not be comfortable talking about um, an abusive parent or an abusive ex within the first handful of dates of knowing somebody. I would not. I would say not only it's okay to not do that. I would say it's appropriate to not do that. A lot of people, um, survivors of abuse in general, again, this stuff's not taught, so they tend to overshare, and they don't see it as a problem. So they're deep diving. Oh yes, here was my past, and here's some really horrific, pivotal moments, traumatic moments in my life. And they're telling a person this after the second or third date. And the problem, this can just tend to lead to more trauma and more hurt and heartache, because then if the other person's overwhelmed, which I think a lot of the times they are, and they leave, or they start getting distance, then there's all these feelings of, oh my gosh, I said too much, and there's shame, and oh, we don't realize that we don't need to be an open book, and part of having respect for ourselves means that we're not being an open book. Um, and also too, being that open book and letting somebody else set the pace is like when we bring our awareness to that, and we're like, oh my gosh, um, I I was answering this other person's questions, not realizing, kind of thinking, well, gosh, I have nothing to hide, or I'm completely comfortable with my past. I don't need to to filter my conversation, right? Um, and not realizing that the unintended consequence of that is now we're letting somebody else set the pace of this relationship. It's by going on this deep dive right away, we are generally unintentionally forming these deeper bonds with this person that might not otherwise be there, generally otherwise won't be there. So, it's like it would be the equivalent of if I was at a coffee shop getting a cup of coffee and uh, the server, the barista, uh, I don't know, were to overhear me talking to a friend and she finds out, oh, my father uh, died of pancreatic cancer. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, my father also died of pancreatic cancer." Well, now we have this connection, right? So there's kind of within 10 seconds of this complete stranger, there's this deeper connection there that wouldn't be there otherwise had we not shared that. On a surface level with, a barista or uh, s- somebody you're just coming across in life, not a big deal. But when you're dating or when you're on a first or second date with somebody and you're just starting to get to know them and we're sharing information, deep information, it has the potential to create that deeper bond. And then it's awkward. Not only can it be potentially hurtful if they up and leave or they can't handle it or whatever, but if we start getting to know them and we realize, oh, this is really awkward. I'm not interested in them. I thought we had more in common than we do, and this just isn't working. But we've got this super deep bond, and now this is really awkward. So it can work both ways. And if they're predatory, they could be using this strategy intentionally. They are intentionally creating, they're pretending to be this nice, safe space for you to land. I'll be there for you and whatever you need and this, that, and the other, but it's all manipulative. They're just trying to get you in bed or they're trying to get into your wallet, kind of a thing. So, and realizing, it it really takes a good, I would say at least 90 days to even start to begin to know somebody for who they really are. It's like that old MTV show. I don't think it's still on there. It was called The Real World. And their little intro to it was, it's the real world. Like what happens when six strangers all live together and people stop being polite and they start being real. And that's exactly what it was. That's exactly how it is with anybody. It just takes, we all tend to kind of be on our best behavior when we meet new people, and then we settle in, and that's when you start seeing people's true colors. So it just takes some time. The big thing with dating is, I think, in part to realize that and to realize we're going to have, if there's chemistry, if there's that connection to begin with, it's easy. There's going to be all of these emotions. We're going to think about them all the time. And there's going to be kind of this infatuation period where it feels like, oh my gosh, this connection we have is just magical. And this might be the one. And it can be very easy to get carried away with that if we don't realize, nah, this is just the infatuation period. It doesn't last. This isn't a relationship. And so many people are, because it feels so good, people are just chasing that high the rest of the time, especially if that person starts showing uh, problematic behavior. They keep thinking, well, I want it to get back. They're making the mistake of thinking that idealized stage is obtainable and that that was the real relationship and that real person. And if they can just get back to that stage, then everything's going to be okay. And so then what do? They try to drag this other person to therapy. They're looking up articles on YouTube, on the internet. Oh, here's everything about narcissism. We're going to get you fixed. And it's part of it is it doesn't work that way. But the other part of it is relationships in general don't work that way because that's the infatuation stage. Relationships don't start to get real until people start to get real. And that level of authenticity shows up where you start asserting yourself. You're disagreeing with the other person. You're setting boundaries. You're saying no, or you're, hey, this is a problem, or hey, do you mind? Or hey, can you not start your laundry at 2 a.m? Or, I can't stay up all night and talk with you. Or it's how people negotiate disagreements and conflict. That's how relationships are truly formed. It's not what we have in common is fun, and that's part of it. But the more important part in what makes for a lasting relationship has to do with how conflict is handled and negotiated and resolved. And resolved. That's the key point with that, because a lot of times it's conflicts avoided, or it's people being aggressive. It doesn't get resolved. And when that happens, that relationship just gets thrown into neutral and it doesn't grow. And that's sad. So yeah, I hope that helps. Lisa asks, how do you get comfortable enough to even try to date again after being with a narcissist? I am terrified. It's been about 5 years. Well, I think it can be helpful to, there's a couple things. Like I was saying earlier, build up a life that you love. And so you have friends, you have hobbies, you're wanting to date from a place of, like, healthy standards of this person needs to contribute to your life instead of, you're just hungry for a relationship and you're willing to settle, kind of a thing. Realizing that that you have a lot of control over this process. So it's going to be going slow, and going at a pace that you're comfortable with. So, and it might be good. And I guess too, maybe not have any expectations. So I don't know. And I don't know how old you are. And I don't even know if that necessarily matters. I will say, just as a heads up to anybody that's listening to this, there's definitely this kind of new horrific trend with online dating in particular, where people joke, they call them nice guys. And it's guys that feel entitled to a woman's time or what have you. And they start getting pushy. And if you reject them, then they lash out with a bunch of verbal and emotional abuse. Oh, you're fat, you're stupid, you're ugly, you should be thankful, da 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 da. Especially to an abuse survivor, that can really cause a tremendous amount of damage. So just a heads up, there's unfortunately seems to be a growing number of men, particularly on the internet, that are doing that. And it's, I guess, try to not let it rock your boat too much. And if you come across somebody like that, I think it can be helpful to focus on, like, oh, I'm so glad that they revealed themselves this soon. They saved me a bunch of time. So, but it's sad how that's kind of become the new normal on the internet. Okay, Lisa says she's 39 with 3 kids. Yeah, I would say going slow, keeping your emotions in check, realizing it's normal to feel that infatuation for that other person, and to not get caught up in it. So to keep spending time with your friends, keep your hobbies, keep your life. This person is they're the candles on your cake. They're not the cake, and they're not even the icing. Like, they're the candles on the cake. So, and realize to just try to not catch feelings for like a solid 90 days. And realize this relationship's not going to start to even have potential until we are both get real, and that conflict and confrontation, until we enter that negotiation stage. until we start disagreeing and that's actually able to be handled and resolved. Until we've entered that stage, we're still in infatuation, and both people are still putting their best foot forward. This is not real. Don't fall in love with this person, because you're seeing the best version of them and they're seeing the best version of you. So that's a bit. And then two, realizing, you know, what happened to you before, you didn't realize what was going on. If you're like the rest of us, you didn't realize what's going on. Now you do. Now you do. And you don't have to stay. You can get up and you can leave. So realizing that you have the power, you have the ability to be self-protective. If somebody starts treating you in a way that you're not okay with, you don't have to get dragged through hell again. You can leave. And so I think a lot of times this anxiety of I'm so terrified to date tends to come from the fact of I don't want to go through all of that again. But realizing you're at a different place in your life now than you were back then. Back then, you didn't have that level of understanding or awareness that you do now. And yeah, I guess I would anticipate meeting people is a mixed bag. They're going to be jerks out there. You're going to come across them. They do exist. And I would say with a degree of frequency, with a higher degree of frequency than, any of us may even realize. Like, they're out there in droves. And that's okay. That's okay. Because you know how to keep yourself safe with your boundaries, with your standards, with your deal breakers, by going slow, by erring on the side of caution, by knowing when, or being in tune with when you're being treated in a way that you're not okay with. That's where that starts. In being able to speak up and say something when that happens early on, instead of giving the other person the benefit of the doubt or thinking, oh, I must not be okay with, I don't know, this person's being overly flirty with me, like right out of the gate. And maybe I'm just being hypersensitive. Why can't I appreciate a good man? It must be because of my abusive ex. I don't want to miss out on a good thing. He's telling me that I'm, too prude or too this, or I'm uptight because I won't meet him right away, or, whatever. Realizing if you're not okay with something, that's it. Like, it's okay for you to not be okay with something. And I think the vast majority of the time, it has nothing to do with your past. It has everything to do with now you're more aware of seeing problematic behavior clearly, whereas in the past, that's all the stuff that we glossed over. And a lot of other people will gloss over it too, including mental health professionals. So it's important to learn to validate yourself, to turn inward, and realize, like, gosh, if somebody's saying or doing something that you're not okay with, and that's okay. We're all individuals, and that's okay for you to not be okay with something. So if a guy is being kind of too flirty out of the gate, or if he's wanting to text you around the clock, or he suggests something that you're not okay with, like he wants to go on a date. It's a little different nowadays with COVID and stuff, but I don't know. He wants to go on a date for a walk in a park, let's say, for example. And you're like, well, I don't know. I'm really not comfortable with that. But other people are like, oh, I don't know. It's romantic. Or, yeah, I think that's a great first date. You guys can get to know each other. It's totally okay to be okay with not going to a park with the stranger, or let's say he wants to go out for dinner. And you're like, God, I don't know if I want to go out for like dinner. I'm more up for going out for coffee. Like, what if there's no connection? That's okay. It's wherever your boundaries are. Okay, let me scroll down. E-Rock says, when you speak up and they give you a negative reaction, I feel like that's already a red flag. Is that fair? I guess it depends on what we're talking about as far as a negative reaction. I guess here's kind of my baseline is I expect to be treated with respect, like at all times. And my standard for my behavior towards others is I will treat them respectfully at all times, especially if they're people that I want in my life that are, and even if they're not, even if they're coworkers or somebody, or even a person in traffic, or there's no point in putting out more negativity into the world. But because what's the point? So then you kind of knock them down a peg, but then you're also knocking yourself down a peg, and then you feel gross, and it's just well, it's gross. There's no point. So treating others respectfully and then being treated respectfully. So I won't be in a relationship where where somebody raises their voice at me, or where they belittle me or put me down, or name calling, or yelling or threatening or intimidating or manipulation. If it's very clear, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna kill myself, or if you don't do this, then I'm gonna quit my job, that kind of stuff. When I start seeing immature behavior, or they're trying to hold me emotionally hostage, then I'm just done, because that shows me right there, this person's got a lot of skills to learn. And I'm not looking for a project. Like, I'm looking for a partner, and I won't be what they're looking for, and they're not for sure what I'm looking for. And it's just going to waste both of our times. And I'm going to be continually frustrated, and they're going to be continually annoyed, because I'm going to be continually bringing it up. But even then, like with healthy boundaries, there would be a point where I would have that deal breaker, which would be pretty like right away, frankly, pretty right away. One or two times after that, first or second time that happened. Because it's always the tip of the iceberg, it's so incredibly not okay. It's like finding out that your accountant stole $5 out of your account. Yeah, it's only $5. It's indicative of a larger problem. You don't want an accountant that's going to steal at all, period. So, and it's really not too much to ask. So, because like I was saying before, every relationship's going to have that conflict. They're going to have disagreements. That's part of it. That's not a problem. The problem is how these disagreements are handled. And not every disagreement, there's a difference between having disagreements and having fights. And not every couple fights, So kind of setting some ground rules for, and this is part of that negotiation phase of, okay, well, we're not seeing eye to eye on this, but being able to be solutions oriented and moving in that direction of negotiating and kind of finding that middle ground, and not resorting to yelling or name calling, or these kinds of, like, realizing if you're really frustrated, then to kind of call a timeout and just say, I'm just frustrated. Like, I just don't think we're going to get anywhere with this tonight. And can we just pick this up tomorrow? Like, I think I just need to go. I need to have some alone time and just decompress, and I will talk to you tomorrow. So, so I guess back to your question, if they're giving you a negative reaction, Like, it's okay for a person to disagree, but it's also reasonable to expect that they disagree um, tactfully. You know, if they launch into an attack, oh, you're so stupid. Why would you even think that? It's ridiculous. And da 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 da. And they start just tearing you down. Like, no, I don't want people in my life that are going to, uh, you know, treat me like that. So, you know, let's see here. Iraq is saying, if I feel uncomfortable about something, it's important. Yeah, I like that, Bonnie. Yeah, she's saying dignity, patience, and respect. Yeah. And there will be times that all of us, myself included, do not handle situations as well as we would like, or as well as they need to be handled. And I mean, to a degree, that's going to happen. So, and that's okay. But what's important is this is just the process. This is like kind of that learning to dance with another person kind of process. Toes are going to get stepped on. Everybody's boundaries are different. Where their boundaries are is going to be different from yours or from your previous partner or whatever, or whoever. So this is where it kind of goes into being accountable. So realizing, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I got really frustrated and impatient, and I am so sorry that I snapped at you. That was not okay. And you own it. And then you really make strides for that to not happen again. But like I said, everybody's boundaries are different. So there's going to be, especially if you grew up in a, household with some dysfunctional communication, there's probably going to be a lot of ways of interacting with other people that haven't surfaced yet to like your conscious level of awareness. And it's not until, the healthier people we're around, the more awareness we have of our own dysfunction or our own imbalances, and realizing, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was a problem. That being impatient or talking to somebody in kind of a stern voice or acting annoyed or bothered every time they talk to you, like, not okay. Not okay. Just trying to think of some examples of some stuff I've done. You know, and then, when it comes to your awareness, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, that is so not okay. And I need to work on that. And I didn't realize that I defaulted into reacting that way. So, it's kind of hard, I think, too, I think so many of us, when we come from this dysfunctional background, we have this idea of what's not okay based on how we were treated. But it tends to be the more obvious. Like, okay, it's not okay to be screaming and yelling or name calling or belittling. Okay, got that. But it's more of like the subtle shades of problematic behavior that can be harder for us to see. That's the kind of stuff that just takes time. And the kind of the healthier people we're around, the more that's going to be brought to our attention. And yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa says there are lots of aha moments I have learning about narcissism and everything that goes along with it, but it so much hurts too. It does. It does. But And that's part of it. That's part of the healing process. I think maybe the light, the silver lining is that these experiences are so painful that healing from them involves examining every single piece of our life. But like I like to say on these shows, the benefit to that is when you go about rebuilding your life, you're doing so with a level of conscious awareness. So you're consciously choosing kind of piece by piece how you're rebuilding your life. That's awesome. And unfortunately, it takes your life getting blown apart for any of us to have the motivation or the desire to take on that massive undertaking of rebuilding our lives. If people are, most people live, it's the whole kind of, most people live lives of quiet desperation kind of a thing. That's the worst place a person can be, because your life is just mediocre. It's not satisfying, but it's not totally awful. There's no motivation for change there. It There's so much power in kind of this rock bottom of this place of rebuilding, and that it can be really exciting because it's truly just this next chapter in your life. And when you realize that you're the author of this book that you call your life, and you get to decide who and what is going to be in this next chapter and for how long. And um, this chapter can be as long as you want or as short as you want. It kind of gets you a little bit excited. Like, I don't know, maybe this next chapter in my life, I'm going to learn French, or I'm going to take up Taekwondo, or both, So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Bonnie was saying, yes, even when people disagree, they need to do it tactfully and respectfully. Yeah. That really shows, I think the level of emotional maturity and emotional awareness, and just, I guess, emotional maturity of a person. It's easy to get along with other people, like when we're in a good mood and we agree on things. It's a totally different ballgame when we're not in a good mood or we disagree on things. And so those are the times that matter. It's like, I've heard over the years in my own life and from other people, different problematic people that they've dated have said, oh, I'll never hurt you, which is a huge red flag right there, because weird that you would even say that. That's sort of like saying, well, I would never steal your wallet. Well, right. Like, I would hope not. Like, it's a weird thing to say. But when somebody says, well, I would never hurt you, my new way before, I was like, oh, because they were telling me everything I wanted to hear. And it was these, oh, it's so wonderful that they're going to take me into consideration, that they're going to be kind, that they're going to be kind of the soft place to land. Like, they're not going to hurt me. That's wonderful, because I'm not looking to be hurt again. The new me is now coming from a place of, words are free and easy. So, and the reality is, you will probably hurt me. Boundaries are going to get crossed because you don't know where mine are, and I don't know where yours are. I will probably hurt you too. How are we going to handle it? That's what I'm focused on, not these grandiose promises that you're never going to hurt me, or that you'll love me forever, or that like, what's the action plan like behind that? Because it's easy to think, especially during that infatuation stage, oh, I'm going to love you forever. Or, oh, always going to feel like this, and da 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 da. And it's pillow talk. You know, how do you handle things when stress, frustration, and anger? How do you handle the difficulties in life? That's the things that count. So, right? Magalodoro says, I never trust people who say you can trust me. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I am with you on that. People are talking about online dating. Magalodoro says, I've always been leery of trying online dating. Yeah, it's a mixed bag. This kind of goes back to having kind of no expectations. This is not the same as having no standards. So let me be clear on that. Still have your standards and your boundaries and your jail breakers, but no expectations of I'm going to meet the one, right? Or that I'm going to only meet wonderful, honest, sincere people. Like, it's a mixed bag. It's the general public. So if you kind of go into it of either, hopefully we'll go on a date and we'll click and I'll meet just a cool person that I have some connection with. If not, if they're a complete wackadoo, then I leave with a good story. Like, just don't internalize that. Don't try to think of it that way, instead of placing all of like your hopes and your dreams on this relationship being like the one, or this person, not hurting you, or these kinds of things. Realize it's the general public. I don't know. Who knows? They could show up and they could be a totally different person. I mean, you just don't know. The internet is the Wild West. You just don't know what's gonna happen. Magalodoro says, the general public scares me. Yes, as they should. This general public is, I think we see that more and more with all of COVID stuff. It just brings out interesting people and the wide range. Yes. I'm actually working on a book that'll be live, that'll be published the end of this month, the 28th, 29th of this month. And it's on it's on what's known as pre-sale, so like you can order it, but the book's not, I haven't uploaded it yet. But it's called Dear Dana, and it's frequently asked questions about dating after narcissistic abuse. And it's I want to say 36 questions that I've seen like repeated over the live streams or in the support group, the questions that I'd had myself. There tends to, even though it feels like there's so much that we need to learn, or there's so much information out there, and there is, at the same time, I have been doing this for about 5 years now and very actively involved in the community. There tends to only be a fairly narrow range of the same questions that people have, that are asked time and time and time again. And I found that when they kind of get the clarity that they're seeking from these questions, or they kind of just get an answer from another survivor at minimum, somebody else who gets it, it helps them get that validation and that clarity that they're looking for. So that's what this book, so anyways, I'm trying a different format for it too. Instead of writing, I'm trying to chunk my books and this information into more digestible bite-sized pieces for a variety of reasons, but you'll have to let me know what you guys think of this format, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Kenneth is saying, yeah, working in a prison has taught me a lot about manipulative behavior. Yes, I can imagine that it would. That would be a book I would love to read about kind of the manipulative behavior that goes on in a prison. Well, guys, I think I'm going to sign off for tonight. I feel like I'm losing my voice. So I will see you guys next week. And I have an email finally up and running. So if you want to ask questions, and I actually have somebody that's going to be gathering questions. So we've got somewhat of a system in place. The email, if you want to ask a question either anonymously or ahead of time for me to answer on a live stream, probably is where I'll answer it. You can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. So, and then just let me know what name, if you want to change your name or whatever to make it anonymous, just let me know. So with all that said, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone and you are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a lovely rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay. Good night.